The phone rang while I was folding towels. Not loudly, not urgently, just once, slow and deliberate, like someone knocking on a door they already knew was unlocked. I answered without thinking. That was my first mistake. "A day after you moved into the apartment," the man said calmly, "I forgot to tell you something important." My fingers tightened around the phone. Something in his voice felt practiced, like he'd rehearsed this moment. Before I go any further, if you care about stories like mine, please like this video and subscribe. It means more to me than you know. Some of us don't have many people left who listen. "I'm sorry," I said. "Who is this?" A quiet chuckle slipped through the line. "The former owner. I just wanted to make sure you're settling in comfortably." I looked around the kitchen. New counters, new paint, the soft hum of the refrigerator. Everything smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and unfamiliar air. "Yes," I replied carefully. "We just moved in yesterday." "Good. Then you probably haven't noticed the cameras yet." My breath caught so sharply it hurt. "I saw you this morning," he continued, unbothered, "standing by the sink. You were rubbing your lower back like it ached. Happens with age. I understand." My knees weakened. I had done exactly that. "You shouldn't joke about things like that," I whispered. "I'm not joking," he replied gently. "I'm informing you." I lowered myself into the kitchen chair. The wood felt cold through my dress. My heart began pounding in my ears. "You installed them," he went on. "Small ones, discreet. Most people never look up." The silence between us stretched, heavy, suffocating. "What do you want?" I finally asked. Another pause, then, "That depends on how much you value your privacy." My hands started trembling. I wrapped them around a mug, though the coffee inside had long gone cold. I thought of my son, how proud he'd been when he signed the lease for us. I thought of my daughter-in-law, how relieved she sounded when she said, "You'll be safer there, Mom." Safer. "I don't have much," I said quietly. "We're just trying to live." "I know, and I don't want money. Not yet." Something inside me cracked. That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak of the floor sounded like a footstep. Every flicker of light felt like an eye blinking. I covered the bathroom mirror with a towel. I changed clothes in the dark. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to my own breathing, wondering how many times someone else had already memorized it. By morning, I realized something even worse. If someone outside these walls could see me, what if someone inside already knew? Because my son hadn't answered my calls, and my daughter-in-law hadn't returned my messages. And deep in my chest, a terrible thought began to form. What if this apartment wasn't the only thing I had been moved into without my consent? But that was only the beginning. I woke up that morning with my heart already racing, as if it had been running all night without me. The room was quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no traffic, just the low hum of the air conditioner and the sound of my own breath, uneven and shallow. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered the phone call, the man's voice, the way he described my movements as if he had been standing right beside me. I sat up slowly, pulling the blanket tight around my shoulders, suddenly ashamed of my own body, of wrinkles, of age, of the way time had softened me. I hated that feeling most of all, that someone I had never met had taken something invisible but precious from me, my sense of being unseen when I needed it. I reached for my phone. No missed calls, no messages. I dialed my son's number again, straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Mom. I said softly, forcing calm into my voice. "Just checking in. Call me when you can." I hung up and stared at the screen, willing it to light up. It didn't. My daughter-in-law's number was next. This time it rang twice, then stopped. I sat there, phone in my lap, feeling something sink slowly in my chest. A familiar feeling, one I had felt years ago, when I realized I was always the one reaching out first, always the one smoothing things over, always the one reminding myself, "They're busy, don't be a burden." I shuffled into the kitchen, careful with every step, suddenly aware of ceilings, corners, vents. I caught myself glancing upward, my eyes searching for tiny black dots, anything that didn't belong. The coffee maker gurgled to life, loud in the stillness. I jumped at the sound and pressed my hand to my chest. "Get a grip," I whispered to myself. "You're safe." But I didn't believe it. As I poured the coffee, my phone buzzed. My body stiffened instantly. Unknown number. I answered without saying hello. "You didn't sleep," the man said. The cup slipped from my hand and shattered against the tile. "I watched you sit on the bed. You kept turning your head like you could feel me." I sat into the chair, knees weak, my throat tight. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, tears blurring my vision. "What did I ever do to you?" A pause, then softer now, almost pitying. "You moved into my place, and you live openly." That word burned. Openly. "I could call the police," I said, though my voice betrayed me. He laughed quietly. "And tell them what? That a former owner installed cameras years ago? That you didn't notice them during inspection? That your son signed the paperwork?" My stomach dropped. "My son?" I whispered. "He handled everything. He didn't read the fine print. Most people don't." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time after that, long enough for the coffee to grow cold, long enough for shame and fear to curl together inside me like a knot I couldn't untie. I thought of all the years I'd given, raising him alone after his father died, working 2 jobs, skipping meals so he could eat more, trusting that love was enough protection. By afternoon, I couldn't stand the silence anymore. I drove to my son's house. When my daughter-in-law opened the door, her smile froze when she saw my face. "Is something wrong?" she asked, though her eyes already knew the answer. "I need to talk to you, both of you." She hesitated just for a second, but I saw it. Inside, my son wouldn't meet my eyes. I told them everything, the call, the cameras, the fear. My voice shook, my hands trembled. I expected outrage, anger, protection. Instead, my daughter-in-law crossed her arms. "Are you sure you're not just confused? Maybe stressed from the move?" Confused. That word landed harder than any threat. I looked at my son. He finally looked up. And then he said the words that broke something in me forever. "Mom, maybe it's time we talk about putting you somewhere safer." I felt my heart crack, because in that moment I realized something terrible. The man watching me through hidden cameras wasn't the only one deciding my fate, and I had no idea how deep this betrayal really went. Cry in front of them. That surprised even me. I just sat there on the edge of their couch, my hands folded neatly in my lap, nodding as if my world hadn't just tilted off its axis. "Somewhere safer," my son had said, like I was a box with cracked edges, like I was fragile glass instead of the woman who once carried him on her hip while balancing bills in the other hand. "I'm not confused," I said quietly. "I know what I heard. I know what I felt." My daughter-in-law sighed, the kind of sigh people use when they're already tired of listening. "Mom," she said, not unkindly, "you're getting older. Stress can do strange things." There it was again, that gentle dismissal, that polite way of telling me my truth was inconvenient. I stood up slowly. My knees ached, but my spine straightened. "I'll handle it," I said. "I just needed my family to know." My son didn't stop me as I walked out. That night, back in the apartment, I sat in the dark with only a lamp glowing softly beside me. I wrapped my hands around a mug of tea, letting the warmth steady me. "Think," I whispered to myself. "Think like the woman you used to be." I remembered something then. When my son signed the lease, he'd insisted on handling everything himself. "It's easier this way, Mom," he'd said. "You trust me, right?" I had. Too easily. I pulled the lease from the folder in the drawer and read it line by line, slowly, carefully. My eyes burned. There it was, an old clause, buried. "Existing monitoring infrastructure acknowledged by tenant." My heart sank. By midnight, I knew the truth was uglier than fear. This hadn't happened to my family. It had happened through them, and I had no idea how much of myself they had already signed away. But the worst realization was still coming. The first thing I noticed was how politely they spoke. That's how it always starts. Not with shouting, not with cruelty, with concern. "With everything that's been happening," my daughter-in-law said over the phone, her voice smooth and measured, "we think it might be time to talk about your finances." I stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the same corner of the ceiling where I'd started to imagine shadows that weren't there, or maybe were. My hand shook slightly, so I leaned it against the counter to study myself. "My finances?" I repeated. "Yes," she said gently, "just to make sure you're not overwhelmed. You've been through a lot." Through a lot, as if the fear hadn't been placed inside me, as if it had simply appeared like a weakness of age. I didn't answer right away. I waited, listening to my own breathing, shallow and uneven. She continued, "We could help manage things, combine accounts, keep everything simple." Simple. I thought of all the years I had kept things simple for others, the envelopes labeled in careful handwriting, the nights I balanced bills at the kitchen table, lamp low so my son wouldn't wake and worry, the pride I felt knowing I never asked for more than I needed. "I'm managing just fine," I said quietly. There was a pause, then a sigh. "Mom," she said, using the word like a soft glove, "this situation with the apartment, it shows you might not be making the best decisions right now." I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't my decision. I didn't install those cameras. "No, but you moved in without noticing them." The words stung. I sat down slowly, the chair creaking beneath me. My knees ached. Everything ached. Even my thoughts felt sore, like they'd been handled too roughly. After the call ended, I stayed there, staring at the table. The grain of the wood blurred as tears welled up, not falling yet, just waiting. That's when my phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. "They're right to worry about you," it read. "You've been very emotional." My stomach dropped. I didn't need to ask who it was. I typed back with trembling fingers, "How do you know what they said?" The response came almost immediately. "Because fear travels faster than truth, and people talk when they think they're helping." I felt something cold slide down my spine. I replayed the last few days in my mind, the timing of the calls, the way my daughter-in-law spoke, already certain, the way my son avoided my eyes as if he'd already accepted a version of me that wasn't real. Suddenly, the apartment felt smaller. The walls leaned in, not because of cameras, but because of intent. That night, I couldn't bring myself to turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, wrapped in an old cardigan, holding a mug of tea that had gone lukewarm long before I took a sip. The steam had faded, but the cup still gave me something to hold on to. I asked myself the questions that haunt women like me. When did I become a problem to solve instead of a person to protect? When did love start sounding like control? I thought of my son as a boy, mud on his shoes, hands sticky with candy, running into my arms like the world was safe because I was there. Had I failed him? Or had he simply learned that silence was easier than loyalty? Another message buzzed in. "If you cooperate," the man wrote, "this can all stay quiet. Dignity is expensive these days." I stared at the words until they burned. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet decision settling deep in my chest. I was done being handled, done being discussed like paperwork, done being frightened into obedience. They thought my silence meant surrender. They were wrong, because while they were planning how to take control of my life, I was beginning to remember who I was, and I had no idea yet just how much they had already taken from me, or how dangerous the truth I was about to uncover would be. What I found next would change everything. I didn't find the truth because I was brave. I found it because I was tired. Tired of whispering in my own home, tired of changing clothes in the dark, tired of feeling like every breath I took belonged to someone else. That afternoon, the air felt heavy, like the apartment itself was holding something back from me. I stood in the living room, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly, clicking with every rotation. That sound, soft but irregular, had been bothering me all day. Click, pause, click. I pulled a chair beneath it and climbed up, my knees protesting. My hands trembled as I removed the cover, fully expecting to find nothing. I almost hoped I wouldn't. But there it was. A tiny black eye, no bigger than a shirt button, blinking faintly red. I froze. "I knew it," I whispered, my voice barely there. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure it could be heard through the walls. I climbed down carefully, holding the small device in my palm as if it might bite me. It was warm, recently used. That warmth did something terrible to me. It made it personal. I searched the apartment then, not frantically, but methodically, slowly, like a woman counting losses. Behind the smoke detector, inside the bathroom vent, above the kitchen cabinets. Each one revealed another camera. By the time I finished, I was sitting on the floor, my back against the wall, surrounded by pieces of my privacy. My hands shook so badly I had to press them into my lap. I plugged one of the devices into my old laptop. I don't know what I expected, maybe static, maybe nothing at all. What I saw instead stole the air from my lungs. Folders, neatly labeled, by date, by room, and then by name. Mine. I clicked one without meaning to. There I was, in my housecoat, rubbing my lower back, standing alone, thinking I was alone. I slammed the laptop shut, gasping, my chest tight. Tears came fast then, hot and humiliating. I covered my mouth so I wouldn't make a sound, as if even my sobs weren't mine anymore. When I finally opened the laptop again, I forced myself to keep going. See everything, I told myself, even if it breaks you. That's when I found the emails, a chain of them, between the former owner and my daughter-in-law. My vision blurred as I read. She's older, easily overwhelmed. If she panics, it strengthens our case. Once she's deemed unstable, the accounts are easier to consolidate. I felt sick. This wasn't just surveillance, it was strategy. They weren't reacting to my fear, they were cultivating it. My hands went cold as I scrolled further. There were references to my son, not directly, but enough. He won't push back. He trusts his wife. He thinks this is for the best. I closed my eyes. I remembered his voice when he said, "You trust me, right?" Trust. I laughed then. A small, broken sound that surprised me. It echoed strangely in the empty apartment. All those moments I thought I was losing my grip, all those times they looked at me with pity. Manufactured. Planned. I wasn't failing. I was being framed. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my cardigan and stood up slowly.
My legs felt weak, but something inside me felt steadier than it had in days. They wanted me scared, small, quiet. Instead, they had given me proof. I copied everything, saved it twice, then a third time just in case. As the sun dipped low, painting the walls in orange light, my phone buzzed. A message from the former owner. "You've been very busy today." My blood ran cold. I typed back, carefully, "You should have taken better care of your walls." There was no reply. That silence told me more than words ever could, because somewhere out there plans were unraveling, and the people who thought they controlled my life had just realized something terrifying. I wasn't confused. I wasn't weak, and I wasn't done. But I still didn't know how far this betrayal reached, or how much it would cost to bring the truth into the light. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, the laptop open in front of me, the glow of the screen wash in my hands in pale blue light. Every so often, I would close it, press my palms flat against the table, and breathe, slowly, deliberately, like I used to when my son was small and scared of thunderstorms. "In through the nose," I whispered, "out through the mouth." But this time, I was the one afraid. The files stared back at me every time I reopened the laptop. Dates, labels, footage of moments I never consented to share. Each clip felt like another thread pulled loose from the sweater of my life, unraveling years of trust. By morning, something had shifted. Fear was still there, but it had changed shape. It no longer sat in my chest like a stone. It moved, it sharpened, it asked questions. I called a legal aid clinic 2 towns over. I didn't tell my son. I didn't tell anyone. My voice shook when the receptionist answered, but she didn't rush me. "Take your time," she said. Those 3 words nearly broke me. When the attorney finally came on the line, she listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't soften her expression when I described the cameras, the emails, the pressure from my family. She let the silence stretch when my voice cracked. When I finished, she spoke carefully. "Ma'am," she said, "what you're describing isn't confusion. It's elder exploitation." The word elder stung, but the word exploitation landed like truth. She explained it slowly, how fear can be manufactured, how control often wears the costume of care, how finances are the first thing people try to take when they want to erase someone's autonomy. "You're not imagining this," she said, "and you're not alone." I hung up and stared out the window. A woman across the courtyard was watering her plants, humming softly to herself. Life just happening. I wondered how many battles were being fought quietly behind closed doors like mine. That afternoon, my daughter-in-law called. Her tone was different now, sharper, less patient. "We need access to your accounts. This has gone on long enough." "No," I replied. A pause. "What did you say?" "I said no," I repeated, my voice steadier than I felt, "and I won't be discussing this again." Silence stretched between us. "You're making a mistake," she said. "You don't understand what you're risking." I did, and that was the problem. That evening, a message came from the former owner. "You've spoken to someone," it read. "That wasn't part of the agreement." My heart pounded, but my hands didn't shake this time. "There was never an agreement," I typed back. "Only theft." The reply came slower than before. "Careful," he wrote. "People who cause trouble often lose support." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I realized something that made my chest ache. I had already lost their support. What I was fighting for now was myself. And once you name the crime, you can no longer pretend it isn't happening. They came to my apartment without calling.
That should have told me everything. My son stood behind my daughter-in-law in the doorway, his shoulders slumped, his eyes already apologizing for something he hadn't yet admitted. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside and let them in. The apartment felt different now. Not safer, but clearer. Like a room after a storm, when the air finally settles and you can see what's been broken. We sat at the table. No tea, no small talk. I reached into the drawer and pulled out the folder. My daughter-in-law frowned. "What's that?" "Documentation," I said. I slid the printed emails across the table first. I watched her face change as she read, confusion melting into recognition, then something darker. My son leaned over her shoulder. His breath caught. "Mom," he whispered. I opened the laptop next. The paused video frame filled the screen. Me, standing alone, unaware. My son turned away immediately, his hands shaking. My daughter-in-law's voice hardened. "This is out of context." "No, it's out of hiding," I said softly. She stood abruptly. "You went behind our backs." I met her eyes. "You went behind my walls." The room filled with silence, thick and suffocating. "I trusted you," I said, looking at my son. "I trusted you with my safety, with my name." His eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know it would go this far." "But you knew it would go somewhere," I replied. That's when I saw it. True regret. Not fear of consequences, but grief for who he had become. My daughter-in-law said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence told me she'd already calculated what this would cost her. As they left, my son stopped at the door. "I'm sorry," he said. I nodded. But apologies don't erase choices, and consequences were already moving quietly through the world. Justice didn't come crashing through the door. It arrived like a letter slipped under it. The former owner was arrested on a quiet Tuesday morning. No sirens, no spectacle, just a call from the attorney telling me the evidence had been enough. "Very enough," she said. My daughter-in-law lost her job 2 weeks later. Conflict of interest, ethical violations. Her name appeared briefly in an internal memo, then disappeared from the company website like she'd never been there at all. My son called me that night. He didn't ask for forgiveness, he just cried. "I don't know how I let this happen," he said. I knew. Fear doesn't just break people, it bends them. "I love you," I told him, "but love doesn't mean silence." After everything, I moved, not because I was forced, but because I chose peace. The new apartment has sunlight in the mornings and neighbors who wave. I drink my tea by the window without looking up at the ceiling. I sleep. Sometimes I still think about the woman I was when this began, confused, frightened, shrinking. I wish I could tell her this: you were never weak, you were being tested, and you survived. But the hardest part, learning how to live after the truth, was still ahead. The first night in my new apartment, I slept with the lights on, not because I was afraid of the dark, but because darkness had learned my name. I lay on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of a building that didn't yet know me. The walls were bare. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and cardboard boxes. Everything was quiet, but my body hadn't caught up with the idea of safety yet. Every small sound made my muscles tighten. The refrigerator clicking on, a neighbor's footsteps overhead, the soft creak of the floor when I turned on my side. I told myself, there are no cameras here. I told myself, you checked. I told myself, you're free. But freedom, I learned, doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in pieces, and sometimes it hurts when it settles in. In the morning, sunlight spilled across the floor in long, gentle lines. I sat at the small kitchen table with a cup of tea warming my hands, watching dust float lazily in the air. No one was watching me hold that cup. No one was counting my movements. The thought made my throat tighten. I cried then, quietly, not from fear, but from relief. The days that followed were slow, intentionally so. I unpacked one box at a time, touching each object like it was an old friend returned from a long absence. My sweaters, my books, the framed photo of my son as a child, missing his front teeth, smiling like the world was kind. I hesitated before placing that photo on the shelf. Love is complicated when it's been bent out of shape. My son called every few days. At first, his words were careful, as if he were afraid of stepping on broken glass. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" I wanted to say, angry. I wanted to say, heartbroken. Instead, I said, learning. And I was. Learning how to sit in silence without suspecting it. Learning how to change clothes without rushing. Learning how to trust my own thoughts again. One afternoon, while watering a small plant on the windowsill, I caught my reflection in the glass. Older, thinner, tired, but still standing. "I survived," I whispered to that woman. She looked back at me like she believed it. That night, I slept without the lights on for the first time, and when I woke up, the room was still mine. But even as peace slowly returned, I knew something important remained unfinished. Healing is personal, but accountability is public, and the truth had one more place it needed to be spoken, because survival is only half the story. My son came alone. No warning, no excuses sent ahead to soften the moment. I opened the door and saw him standing there, hands clasped tightly in front of him, shoulders curved inward like a boy about to be scolded. "Hi, Mom," he said. I stepped aside and let him in. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. The kettle whistled softly on the stove, filling the space between us with sound so neither of us had to rush into words. "I didn't protect you," he said finally. The sentence landed heavily, but it didn't surprise me. "No," I replied. "You didn't." His eyes filled with tears. He looked older somehow, less certain. "I thought I was helping," he said. "She kept saying you were scared, that you couldn't handle things anymore. I wanted to believe it was care, not control." I wrapped my hands around my mug and felt the warmth seep into my palms. "Love doesn't ask for your voice to be silenced," I said gently, "and care doesn't grow from fear." He nodded, wiping his face. "I see that now." We sat quietly for a while. Outside, a car passed slowly. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed. Life continued, indifferent to our reckoning. "I forgive you," I said at last, "but forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting." He looked up, startled. "I need boundaries," I continued. "I need respect, and I need to know that if I say no, it will be enough." He swallowed hard. "I understand." I wasn't sure he fully did, but understanding, like healing, takes time. When he left, he hugged me carefully, as if afraid I might break. I didn't. After the door closed, I sat alone for a long time thinking about all the ways women are taught to shrink to keep peace, all the times I had done it without realizing. I promised myself something then. Never again. But justice still had one final shape to take. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. Plain walls, neutral colors, a long table where truth was meant to sit without decoration. I wore my best cardigan, not for appearance, but for courage. It had been with me through many winters. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. My hands trembled at first, then they steadied. I spoke clearly. About the cameras, about the fear, about how easily age is mistaken for weakness. No drama, no exaggeration, just facts. And something remarkable happened. People listened. The former owner avoided my eyes. My daughter-in-law stared straight ahead, her expression tight and unreadable. When it was over, I felt lighter, not triumphant, but complete. Justice, I learned, isn't loud. It doesn't shout or celebrate. It restores balance. In the weeks that followed, life settled into something gentler. I joined a small community group. I started walking in the evenings. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. I wasn't the woman I used to be. I was stronger. And as I sat by my window one quiet morning, tea cooling between my hands, I understood something deeply. What was taken from me did not define me. What I reclaimed did. And the final lesson, one I would carry for the rest of my life, was still waiting to be spoken.
I didn't recognize myself at first. That realization came one quiet morning as I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my hair slowly, deliberately. The woman looking back at me had the same eyes, the same soft lines carved by years of laughter and worry, but there was something else there now. Stillness. Not emptiness, not numbness, but a calm that had been hard-earned. I set the brush down and placed both hands on the sink, steadying myself as memories drifted in. The fear, the humiliation, the nights I lay awake listening to my own breathing, wondering who else might be listening too. For a long time, I thought surviving meant going back to who I was before. I was wrong. Survival doesn't rewind you. It reshapes you. I learned that in the small moments. The first time I laughed out loud in my new apartment without flinching. The first time I slept through the night without waking in panic. The first time I said no without explaining myself. I filled my days gently. Morning walks, tea with neighbors who knew nothing about my past and asked nothing of my future. I planted herbs on the windowsill and watched them grow, slow and stubborn, toward the light. Growth doesn't rush. Neither did I. Sometimes the memories returned uninvited, a certain hum, a shadow in the corner of my eye. When they did, I didn't scold myself anymore. Healing isn't linear, I whispered once, pressing my hand to my chest. It loops, it revisits, and that's okay. My son called less often now, but when he did, the conversations felt more honest, less guarded. We spoke like two adults learning how to rebuild something fragile, brick by brick. I loved him, but I no longer disappeared inside that love. One afternoon, as rain tapped softly against the window, I opened the old folder on my laptop, the one filled with evidence, fear, and pain. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer owned me. That chapter had been written, acknowledged, closed. I brewed a fresh cup of tea and carried it to the window, watching the rain blur the world outside. The warmth seeped into my hands, and I realized something profound. For the first time in a long while, I felt whole. Not untouched, not unchanged, but whole. And yet, as peace settled around me like a familiar shawl, I knew this story wasn't just mine to keep, because every scar carries a lesson, and every lesson deserves to be passed on. The final truth, the one that mattered most, was still waiting to be spoken.
If you're listening to this, let me tell you something gently. I don't know your life. I don't know your family, but I know what it feels like to slowly disappear while everyone calls it love. That's why I'm speaking now. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity. What happened to me didn't begin with cameras. It began with silence. The silence of a woman taught to endure. The silence of a mother afraid of becoming a burden. The silence that grows when you convince yourself your discomfort is less important than someone else's convenience.
I stayed quiet because I thought that was kindness. I learned too late that silence can be an invitation. If I could sit beside you right now, cup of tea between us, this is what I would say. Love should never cost you your dignity. Care should never require your fear, and family should never ask you to shrink to make them comfortable. Age does not make you invisible, it makes you experienced. I was not weak because I trusted, I was human. And when trust was broken, I did not fall apart, I woke up. Justice didn't give me my old life back, it gave me something better. Choice. The choice to live without apology, the choice to protect my peace, the choice to speak even when my voice trembled. Sometimes karma doesn't look like punishment. It looks like truth being revealed slowly, steadily, until no one can pretend anymore. I don't hate those who hurt me. I don't carry that weight. I carry wisdom now. And I carry this hope that if you are being watched, controlled, dismissed, or quietly erased, you will remember that it is never too late to reclaim yourself. You are not confused. You are not difficult. You are not disposable. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be safe. You are allowed to begin again. I am living proof of that. And if my story stays with you even a little, then it was worth telling. Because sometimes the bravest thing a grandmother can do is teach the world how to stand back up. Thank you for listening.